All right, good morning, everybody. I say that and I stumble because I think it's very close to afternoon, but it's still technically morning. All right, so we are starting presentations today. Just as a reminder, we have two presentations today, two presentations on Wednesday and a single presentation on Friday. So we'll be out a little bit early on Friday. A few notes. A note of complete irrelevance. Somebody left a duck up here on the front of the stage. I don't know why I was going to ask if anybody belongs to anybody, but I'm just going to leave it up here. It's going to be the duck for good luck. All right. So you see what I did there? Yeah. So as we're going through this, a few things. First of all, I am recording the presentations. They will go on YouTube for a very brief period of time. That is to assist the people who need to take notes and want to refer back to the presentations, as well as the people who are studying for the final exam. For those of you who are worried that it's going to stay on there forever, I will actually take them down at the end of finals week. So you don't need to worry about your name or image or likeness being violated. So that's going to be the first thing. Second, please keep in mind that if you are opting out of the final exam, which I believe will be the vast majority of people in this class, you do need to provide notes for all presentations other than your own. They do not need to be excessively detailed, but they do need to reflect that you paid attention to the entire presentation, that you were engaged with the entire situation. That being said, while the presentations are going on, when you are not typing notes, please make sure you give your presenters your full attention. It is very difficult to present when people have their faces down in their computer, and this is coming from personal experience. For those of you who are taking the final exam, you will still want to take notes, as I will be putting 4 multiple choice questions from these presentations, five multiple choice questions from these presentations, just 5 multiple choice questions on the final exam from these presentations. So 1 from each presentation. You'll want to make sure you have a good coverage of that, which again is why the presentations will be available on YouTube. And so our first group up is going to be our robotics and AI group. So I'll let you guys get started.
Yep. All right, so we're doing our presentation over robotics and AI. We're group 4. I'm Ryan.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying.
I'm Jack. I'm Alex.
I'm Matt.
What we gotta click on? Yeah. All right, so just kind of going over the introduction. So our field is AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics. They're kind of combining to develop machines that are intelligent enough to perform tasks autonomously and with minimal human intervention. So the systems are equipped with sensors, actuators, and algorithms to help them perceive their environments, make decisions, and then execute actions. We see examples of this through self-driving cars, drones, and then also industrial robots, which we are covering. All right, so a little bit about the background. So the early developments of robotics date back to ancient civilization. The first one was in ancient Greece with their mechanical puppets, and then the mechanical birds of Mozi in China. These were kind of used more for just entertainment and amusement parks, and then also just demonstrating just like their technical skill, showing what they're capable of doing. Robotics kind of took off in the 20th century with the development of industrial robots like for welding and assembly and manufacturing plants. I know like Ford and Amazon have kind of adapted to those and implemented those into their warehouses. So applications that we see of these, just a couple of them that we'll cover more of them in depth later. But just in the healthcare, performing delicate procedures on surgery, and then also helping with rehab therapy. They're able to just get in small precision, do those little tasks that we're unable to perform by hand. And then also in agriculture, planting, weeding, and then harvesting, they help with productivity, and then also they reduce the labor costs in regards to a regular employee.
All right, so a little bit about the background of robotics. What I thought I would do is relate some of the topics that we learned about AI and how it's implemented in robotics. So the first one that we covered in this class relates into AI is machine learning. So machine learning essentially is algorithms implemented by AI that enables robots to learn and make decisions like humans do. So some examples that we see. You think back to the 4 types of machine learning. So the main one that's used is reinforcement learning, which is these robots are learning motor skills and different types of movements, and they can do this through trial and error. And they can do this And it's programmed to where it allows them to learn the most efficient and best ways to move and until they master those skills. And then next is autonomous decision making. So this essentially is just more algorithms programmed into the robots to allow them to make decisions on their own. So what they do, but it allows them to analyze data like humans do and then make decisions based off what the data is telling them like a human would do. So this eliminates that human interaction that normally would take place. And then lastly is predictive maintenance, which essentially is their sensors and algorithms built into the robots that allow them to predict when the equipment might fail or there might be maintenance needed for the robots or machines. Next is the natural language process. So this essentially allows the robots to interpret the human language and then do whatever tasks a human may want them to do. So some examples, obviously, is the human to robot interaction. So with them being able to understand the commands that the humans are giving them, this allows you to collaborate well with the robots and the different machines to make processes more efficient and better. Voice control also, the robots can understand verbal communication with the humans with certain algorithms and processes implemented. And I think of like Siri or Alexa when you ask them to do something and it can respond to whatever task you ask it to do and perform that. Like if you ask Alexa to play music and understands that, it'll do that for you. Then lastly is sentiment analysis, which is just allows the robots to understand the tone and what message you're trying to get across to the robots or machines. And lastly, this is a topic that we didn't cover, but it's computer vision. And this essentially gives these robots and machines a sense of their environment. And the way they do that is there's some environmental perception, which by these robots being able to analyze the visual data presented to them, they can detect certain objects, recognize different landmarks and map their surroundings, which makes these processes more efficient when doing things like that. And then kind of along those lines, there's object recognition, which allows these robots and machines to track, identify, and classify certain objects of interest. And I think of healthcare potentially, and if there's robots or machine helping with surgery, that they need to identify potentially what doctors or the surgeons may need, and they can track and make sure they do find the right objects that a doctor may need, and would in turn make that process more efficient. And then lastly, again, is the human to robot interaction. So these robots could potentially be programmed to visually understand what the humans are wanting, like potentially, like I said, like a surgeon may be putting his hand out and asking for a certain object, and that robot being able to detect and find what he's asking for and give that to him. So that's what I'll have for the background.
Yes, now we're going to give a little bit of background about how these AI robots are used today. You'll kind of see, like Jack was saying, a lot of these robots, a big part of like AI and robotics is the ability for the computers to have a vision almost, so like the detecting objects and things like that, being able to recognize things. So for example, in healthcare, there's an AI robot that can do blood draws completely autonomously without doctors or nurses. It uses ultrasound to find the veins or the blood vessels it needs, and then it will draw the blood from the patient. It's also used in surgery. So it can be used like to help doctors visualize the patient, or just to perform, like Ryan was saying, more minor surgeries completely autonomously. And then also with basic support tasks, so things like helping patients clean their room, doing a patient's laundry, or with medical research, doing things like basic testing. And then in terms of manufacturing, one of the things that AI robots can do is called piece picking. So that's kind of like taking from a pile of objects or a conveyor belt of objects. It can recognize and sort different objects. So like one example of this would be, it's not a manufacturing example, but piece picking is recycling plants will use AI to detect which objects that people recycled are actually recyclable and which ones are not, and it will sort those off the conveyor belt pretty accurately. Another example is apparel manufacturing, or just it can do intelligent assembly autonomously. And then also another field it can help with is agriculture, like Ryan mentioned. So there's new AI and drones and cameras that can detect when a plant is ripe or ready to harvest. And a lot of these robots have arms on them that can actually harvest the crop themselves. Once it detects that the plant is ripe, it can harvest it. And also with exploration, which is really cool. It's used on Mars rovers for like things like, so the rovers can plan its path, It can detect objects or it can navigate the terrain. This is really useful, that the fact that it can do this all autonomously because of the distance between Earth and Mars. It's sometimes there's a long delay between remote control and the rover. So the fact that the robot can do things on its own eliminates that delay. And then a similar thing with ocean robotic vehicles. So these vehicles can go underwater and they can search for certain marine life and track them without the help of humans.
So I'm kind of going to talk about where just the status is for robotics. And so obviously in 2020, COVID just caused huge labor shortage. And because of that, there was just high unemployment and companies needed to look elsewhere to supply that labor. And so many companies turned to robots, and these robots were able to perform just the tedious, repetitive tasks, and even some of the more physically demanding types of jobs, such as carrying heavy objects and placing them on high shelves and things like that. But this did lead to an increase in productivity and efficiency, just because it led to less human error, and this essentially will help with future cost and just lowering those costs in general. So right now, well, as of 2021, in the industrial robot market, there have been 500,000 installations, and this is expected to reach 700,000 by 2025. And then if we look more at the humanoid robots, so these ones that can read humans' gestures and just like naturally interact with humans, this market is valued at 1.8 billion currently, and is supposed to get to 13 billion in the near future. But these robots aren't just used for manufacturing or maintenance like we've kind of talked about. Some of them are replacing tasks like food delivery or even Uber and Lyft services. So this picture that I have here, this is found on like 20 plus campuses right now, but it delivers food and groceries to students and local residents. So campuses such as Purdue, Kentucky, UCLA, if you've ever been on those campuses, you've probably seen these robots roaming around the sidewalks and things like that. And then, so Waymo, these are self-driving cars. I was just in Arizona for spring break and I saw a lot of these at the airport, but they're essentially taking the place of Uber and Lyft. So they just drive people wherever they want to go. You just put in your location on the GPS and it takes you without a human driver. And then so this next slide, I'm kind of just going to talk about some current robots that are being tested. Obviously, in the workforce, some people might be weary of robots taking over, but the current status is these robots are being used in collaboration with humans as they're still learning. But this first one is a mecha. So this one is the humanoid robot, which can read facial expressions and have more natural interactions with its human counterparts. And so it also has voice recognition, and it can even like, it knows what age or what emotion the person, so like if it's a young person and it might know that they're 7 years old and it has to talk a little bit dumber to them. But if you're sad, if you're angry, it kind of can recognize those emotions and talk to you in a different way. And then this one is RMR6. So this was developed in Germany, and it's basically for industrial or manufacturing plants, but it can use tools such as power drill, hammers, and things like that to fix maintenance on other machines. And it can also like clean workspaces and things like that, and can even ask other employees for help when it needs to. And then this last one, the Kime robot. So this I think is the most interesting. People of this class might like it, but this is a robotic bartender. So it can serve food, drink, basically whatever you want. So it uses the tablet and someone orders a beer or a hot dog, whatever they want, and then that bartender can automatically get it ready. So it says that it can serve 253 drinks or food per hour, and that's like pouring 2 beers every 6 seconds. So it would be interesting to see if Kansas City Chiefs or Cardinals or whoever, like they can implement this into stadiums, and maybe this is just another way to get rid of long lines at other concession stands.
It's me.
Okay, so looking at the future where the robotics industry is growing like very rapidly, especially with advancements in like software, AI and hardware and then sensor technologies. We're just rigging these robots with a bunch of sensors because the cost of these sensors is getting a lot cheaper, so we can put more of them on the robots. And then that works well with the AI because the more information the AI has, the better it can operate the robot. We're just seeing like everything is becoming more and more sophisticated. The advancements, it's not linear, it's basically exponential, so it's growing faster at a faster rate. And we're probably going to start seeing these things sooner than we expect. So the trends we see right now in industry we're starting to see them get implemented in not fun jobs like manufacturing, warehousing, and then distribution. And then we're also seeing strategic partnerships with like software AI companies and these cutting edge robotic companies. So one big one I saw is like Figure One. I don't know if anyone has seen those guys, but they partnered with OpenAI, which are like the ChatGPT people. And then there's a clip online with like the guy talking to the robot, like saying, "Do my dishes," and it does it, and then it like talks to it back. And then we're just seeing like basically the software with the AI is going to be very compatible with the robots, and we're going to see like super intelligent things like droids that can do whatever human can do. These are some cool examples I found. The one on the left is Boston Dynamics. That's like a brand new robot that they came out with a couple weeks ago. It's like all electric. And then a quote I found on their website was, "Atlas will move in ways that exceed human capabilities." And then the one on the bottom is the Figure One robot. That's a clip I pulled from. Basically the guy's asking it to do the dishes and it does it. And he's like, "I'm hungry, give me something to eat." And then the robot picks out an apple and says, "Here's an apple," just like unprompted, uncoded. The robot is using its visual sensors to detect what an apple is. And basically what they want to do with these things is replace human labor. The quote on the bottom basically says, human labor accounts for like 50% of production costs. If you can replace a human with a robot, then you only have to pay the robot. You only have to pay for it one time to buy the robot, and then it's basically free after that. And it's just going to make everything a lot cheaper in the future. But also it's going to take away a lot of jobs. So it's kind of a give and take. And then I found a clip of that Atlas robot being kind of creepy. Yeah, so that's like already in production. I saw they're doing like a deal with Hyundai. So those things are already making cars and stuff. I don't know how to get this. All right, whatever.
Yeah, so just for the conclusion, just to kind of wrap up like what our groups talked about today. So as for like the field merges AI and robotics to create smart machines that work independently or with minimal human input. Key concepts of AI robotics include machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing. And then some examples of those which we talked about were reinforcement learning, environmental perception, and human robot interactions. And then AI is used more today than ever before, creating never before seen advancements within the market. And some examples of those were like the healthcare market, manufacturing and labor, agriculture, and transportation, like with what Claire talked about. Just continuing on, a rise in industrial and AI robotics grew the market value of humanoid robotics to almost 2 billion. And like Claire said, that's supposed to rise to almost 13. This trend will continue as implementation of smart machines in manufacturing, warehousing, and distributing continues to rise, and materials and software advancements enable smart machines to adopt humanoid forms.
So something that Claire said that I wanted to, and this is not just for Claire, but maybe anybody can contribute to this. There's a commentary that, a comment that when you have machines that are in this realm, they would actually perform fewer errors than humans. Is that just commentary on machines, machines that commit fewer errors than humans because humans are prone to errors, or is that a commentary that that the actual technology underlying it will actually result in fewer errors?
I think it's more so, like the technology behind it, like if you can program, like in the manufacturing industry, like this robot to kind of like the recycling thing, like, distinguish between this can be recycled, this cannot, like, it just gets away from any of the ambiguity and then it just puts it in the right pile. So kind of like with, what we talked about in class, like, the yes or no or spam or not spam, like, it's just more direct instead of black and white like the human might see it.
And I think that leads to an interesting question, and I'm going to throw a few interesting questions at you, some not really fair. But as far as robotics, AI robotics goes, it seems like it's very well positioned of something that's repetitive tasks that don't require a lot of variation. Do you see problems of people trying to use AI robotics in situations where professional judgment might be required?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can't think creatively. So that's kind of a problem. It can only learn from like its own experience. So like with the AI robotics, like kind of like I said, a lot of it is like that it does most of what a normal robot can do, but it's more adjusted based on what it can detect, really. So like it's more versatile than like a typical robot, but it still can't think creatively.
Yeah, so when you mentioned the robots that can cook food and serve beer, that I'm always really hesitant to think about a robot cooking my food, because if it's too salty, the robot's going to say I put in the right amount of salt. And so if that's the case, I'm going to have two questions. The second one will be very obvious when I ask the first one. What areas of labor do you think that AI robotics is well positioned to displace human labor?
I kind of touched on that. It was more like manufacturing, warehousing, distribution. Those kind of somewhat dangerous jobs that don't require a lot of, I guess, higher thinking.
More tedious tasks.
Yeah.
Simply lines like repetitive.
And then obviously the follow-up to that is, which areas do you think that AI robotics will not be able to displace human labor?
Things like accounting, stuff like that.
Any other questions? John, guys? I completely forgot to adjust the camera, so the camera was on Matt and Alex the entire time. All right. Got a ransomware group up now. You take over.
When I look at Office 365. So dang. What do I got? Since I'm looking, I should be over here, right? Yes. I guess we can see if this works. Back here, so. Okay, so 2 and 4. Yes. I'll be on the end and we can just switch as we go.
Well, I didn't drag it out, I was just.
Oh, shit.
It's all there.
Yeah.
We're all just sitting. Oh, sorry. I was like, "You guys."
Exhibit, oh wait, oh, see that camera.
Yeah,
Do
okay.
authentication.
Oh, wait, it's
Yeah.
not. There's not much information for the introduction.
There's no.
Let's take some deep breaths.
This is what I want. We got this, Ming. It's right there. Which one? Right, or down there, that one, down there. Yes.
Okay, so our topic was ransomware, and I'm Anna Burek.
I'm Hannah Helsenbeck.
I'm Megan Pike.
I'm Jillian Pride.
I'm Leon Woodring.
I'm Kate Yates. Right, so here's the introduction of ransomware. In today's digital landscape, we can kind of see the threat of ransomware becoming larger than ever. According to Jonathan Crow, a director at a top IT and security company, there are 1.7 million ransomware attacks every day, which means there's about 19 ransomware attacks occurring every second. So by the time this class finishes, about 57,000 ransomware attacks will have happened. This gives us a good idea of kind of the pace, the relentless pace really, that cybersecurity brings. We all remember the software attack at Truman last year and how it kind of stopped us working like at a halt. This is a great real life example of one of the ransomware attacks that take place every 19 seconds. To define ransomware, it's kind of a hostile software that is designed to block access to any computer system until a sum of money is paid. Attackers do this by establishing their presence in the software, then they encrypt any files that they can find and display their message of how much they want to receive and what you should do. Some steps have been taken to reduce these attacks, like filtering DNS queries, which are IP addresses that we use to access the internet, using browser isolation, duo security, and training users on information security. Still, this can be a problem if hospitals or places like that need to get their systems back up in due time for a patient's status. The company might not be able to take this time to investigate and solve the problem since they're kind of in the hands of somebody else. So it might be a safer call in that case to pay the ransom. In this presentation altogether, we will be looking into the background, current status, and future considerations of ransomware as a whole.
All right, so some background about ransomware. The first documented ransomware attack was in 1989 at the World Health Organization's IAS conference. And here, 20,000 diskettes, also known as floppy disks, were labeled as AIDS information and sent to attendees. It was called the PC Cyborg Trojan. It was distributed by biologist Joseph Pott. What made it ransomware was that to regain the access to their systems, users had sent $189 to a PO box in Panama. It also used symmetric cryptography to encrypt the names of the user's files on the C drive, which is what has all the computers like name files and programs on. Eventually, asymmetric encryption was used, which made ransomware more easier and effective. Another important development has been the ability of ransoms to be paid with cryptocurrency, which is harder to trace. And so now most ransomware payments are made with Bitcoin, which is more well-known and accessible than other cryptocurrencies. Ransomware also really picked up in the mid-2010s with new variants such as CryptoLocker, which infects the user's computer through malicious emails. So this is like if you get an email and there's suspicious links, like, oh, you want a free vacation, that's how they infect you. It also used public and private key encryptions as compared to PC Cyborg symmetric key encryption. It also used Bitcoin transactions to collect the ransom and return for the key. And then lastly, we saw another rise in ransomware in the early 2020s with the pandemic. In this graph made by Chain Analysis, we see a significant rise in ransomware payouts in 2020, which can be attributed to the increase in remote working caused by COVID. The pandemic allowed for many opportunities for ransomware since home computer systems had less controls to protect against ransomware. Also, emails disguised as information about the pandemic or government assistance were now more effective with the uncertainty and panic going on with the pandemic. As more and more systems were improved to deal with the changes caused by the pandemic and working at home, ransomware payouts started declining again as there are other solutions such as having your data backed up, which prevent victims from having a payout. To fight against the rising attacks, the U.S. government also released Stop Ransomware.gov during this time, with resources on how to report, prevent, and education on ransomware. And that leads us to where we are today.
So the current status of ransomware is as an active threat. In March of 2023, the US government declared it a national security threat, and its presence has only increased since then. The majority of attacks are on industries like government, healthcare, and education, with a lot of 2020 or a couple of 2023 victims, including the US Department of US Marshals, the City of Dallas, MCNA Dental, and our very own Truman State University. Some stats from 2023 over the main three industries, with healthcare, the statistic that they will spend over $125 billion from 2020 to 2025 in order to defend against breaches. Only 64% of their data actually being restored. And for the 13th year in a row, the healthcare industry reported the most expensive data breaches with an average cost of $10.9 million. Not to say that they are the most targeted, but when they are attacked, it does end up being the most expensive. The education industry is actually the most targeted of 2023, with 79% of higher education institutions reported being attacked. Their average cost was $750,000, which is quite a bit less than the healthcare organizations. Government organizations being attacked is what led to its threat level being increased to a national security threat. Over the past 3 years, 2046 ransomware attacks have struck government organizations and an estimated cost totaling $52 billion. For government organizations, a lot of times the cost to restore the system is greater than the actual ransom price demanded. With one example being a town that ended up paying $350,000 in order to restore their systems, when the ransom that was asked only totaled $199,000. Some stats from across the board are that the average ransom takes 22 days for systems to be restored. The 97% of organizations attacked get their data back, meaning that 3%, regardless of whether or not they paid the ransom, have continued on without their data. And the number of attacks has risen by 13% in the last 5 years. One of the most recent and prominent attacks has been against the United Health Group, which is an insurance agency. This has massively affected the way that people are able to get their prescriptions, working with pharmacies, and has had a detrimental effect on people's ability to receive their health care. The current fight against ransomware is led by a interagency coordination between the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A lot of organizations, including these two, are just continuing work to raise awareness and ease the ability for people to get protection for themselves and their organizations.
So now one future consideration that Dr. Barnes kind of mentioned in class was smart homes. And there's the Smart House movie that Disney released in 1999 that I definitely watched with my older siblings, but I know like we're a little bit young for that. But in 1999, people probably didn't think that any of that was realistic. And here we are in 2024 with maybe your maid robot locking in your house isn't realistic, but your smart home being attacked is realistic. So there are many options for IoT devices in homes today. IoT standing for, Internet of Things devices. And that is defined as everyday objects that have sensors, software, and other technologies integrated into them that allow them to connect to the internet and exchange data, according to a LinkedIn article published by Unisense Advisory. So some examples of that are just like your regular security systems, lights, kitchen appliances, baby monitors, garage doors, and just regular locks on your house. So how can these systems be attacked? First, unauthorized access is very common, because people have weak passwords or just default settings that are easily hacked. Then denial of service, where the system is flooded with so much information that it is no longer able to perform the intended tasks. Middleman attacks are when the hackers intercept communication between the smart devices and the network. Device spoofing is when the hackers impersonate devices, legitimate devices on the network. And then IoT botnets is where botnets compromised devices launch an attack that overwhelms the network. And all of these different types of attacks can be used along with ransomware to make a profit by these hackers. So how can you protect yourself from these attacks? First, multi-factor authentication is a pretty simple way to have your data more secure by having not just a username and password, but also having another step after that. Changing your default passwords, because those are commonly guessed and accessible for hackers. Updating your firmware and software, because those updates often have to do with security. So that could lead to less breaches due to system security failures. And then reviewing and addressing privacy security, because a lot of the times those settings have a lot of things turned on that you actually don't need. So it increases the amount of data that is being shared from your devices, leading to you being more likely to be involved in a data breach. And then lastly, regularly monitoring your device activity can allow you to catch suspicious activity before it is too late.
So AI has really been a game changer as far as ransomware goes. It's made it easier for cyber criminals to attack systems that aren't as protected. One example of this, systems used to be when people would do like ransomware, if they didn't use an official system, they would have to do a lot of manual work, and then there would be a smaller scope and it'd be less efficient. So now, as far as phishing goes, Kate kind of mentioned earlier about like, where you get sent a link that you want a free vacation or something like that. Something that you would normally think that a stereotypical grandma might fall for, because there's usually like, bad grammar, bad spelling, it doesn't flow. But now with AI, people are able to craft these emails that are more convincing and can convince a larger group of people, as well as they are able to have AI revise and create codes of ransomware, which makes it easier for people of all experience to create this ransomware. It also makes it easier to identify targets. Instead of going through maybe like social media and trying to take them out manually, people can now have AI observe a bunch of different websites and take information from them to find susceptible targets, and then also find different faults in their systems. But you can also use AI for protection against these types of issues. One is you can use it to avoid phishing by having it scan emails before it comes through. It can look at suspicious activities and different patterns and remove it from your mailbox before you even see it, removing the threat of clicking on a phishing link. It can also create employee training where you can see the different types, like it will use correct updated data to show people what the identifiers of different phishing or different threats, as well as how to like correct them. And it can also identify through information about employees which ones would be most susceptible, and so you can target, like, look at those specifically and use them and make sure that they are prepared. You can also use AI-powered security solutions, which one example is XDR, which stands for Extend, Detect, and Respond. And it basically correlates data from different sources, such as like emails, your networks, the cloud, and we'll put them all together to look for different threats. And it would only take a couple of hours, whereas if you were to do it manually yourself, it would take more like weeks or months.
So now that you know more about the history of ransomware, its current status, and some future considerations, you also need to be aware of its impact in your life and the lives of those around you. While Truman students like us have had firsthand experience with ransomware, many of those around us might not have that experience. So it is important for us to share our experience and knowledge with those around us so we can decrease the likelihood of other victims. As Anna mentioned, there are multiple ways that people can use to prevent ransomware. However, in reality, many people do not use those methods. These might be for reasons because they think that what they do might not have that much of an impact. It is too complicated to set up, or they are just too lazy to do it. So our recommendations when dealing with these issues are first, knowledge. Inform the individuals about the impact and potential threats. You can do this through just a conversation or a presentation such as this one. Our second recommendation is guidance. If they are confused or think the setup is too complicated, show them how to do it. And finally, options. It is very important to remember that while all methods of prevention are important, one is better than none. For example, many people do not like dual authentication because they may forget their phone or the other device they use. And then they also, sometimes it can log you out after you've been working on something for some time, or they're just feeling lazy and don't want to do the extra step. You can counteract this by using another method, especially in your more personal home. People are really hesitant to do it in their daily life. So any other options is better. So some important ways that you can prevent a ransomware attack is by updating you and your family's personal devices. Informing others and updating your weak and repetitive Wi-Fi passwords are one way that you personally can prevent a ransomware attack. Thank you.
So talking about the industries, you mentioned three primary industries: government, healthcare, and education. We obviously had firsthand experience with the Trinity State attack. Do you think this is hypothesizing probably well beyond the comfort zone? But do you think if we were a hospital rather than an educational institution, that our outcome would have been the same as we had with the ransomware attack for Truman State? So I guess for context, Truman State did not pay the ransom. They relied on backups that were 2 weeks old. Do you think that would be a feasible approach for a hospital to take?
I think depending on that hospital's situation, like if it is a smaller hospital that doesn't necessarily have a lot of critical patients that have recent like issues that have been going on, I think that is a feasible option. But I think a lot of times paying the ransom is more efficient cost and time wise than not paying the ransom, especially for hospitals.
And that leads to an interesting point, because I believe the point was made that oftentimes a remediation of the ransomware attack is more expensive than paying the ransom itself. How do you justify that from a cost benefit perspective? Because we're very, very sensitive about that in accounting and business. The benefit has to exceed the cost. Do you think that if we pay more to fix the ransomware problem or fix the security problem, that it justifies a larger benefit than if we just paid the ransom?
I think not paying the ransom works more as a deterrence for people to try that in the future. Whereas paying the ransom kind of leads people to believe like, I will succeed if I do this thing. But in situations like with hospitals, which are kind of the most expensive victim of ransomware, I think that paying it, while it does display that like if you can, like if people do that again in the future, that like the ransom will be paid, the lives that will be saved and the health benefits from the quicker action, as well as the cost benefits will, I think, outweigh the cost.
I also think that for like the accounting industry specifically, there's a lot of like financial information. So they're gonna need to update their system anyways to like prevent more attacks in the future. So they would have to spend their money on that anyways. So they might as well not pay the ransom if it's not like a critical thing, and then spend the money to update their system to prevent future attacks.
One problem that the US government has had in trying to limit ransomware attacks is the fact that they don't own most of the infrastructure, which facilitates the ransomware attacks. Do you think that the fact that these ransomware attacks are occurring, that security is being breached by infrastructure that's owned by private organizations, do you think that means that this infrastructure should be viewed more as a social good because it actually can create social problems if abused? I guess what I'm asking is I know it's a confusing question, but the problem is if we say that there's a bridge out, okay? That's easy. The government owns the bridge, okay? They can fix the bridge. If we say that there's a weak part of the internet and where people can readily access, and this is a terrible example, but people that could readily commit cyber attacks, but the government has no ability to regulate that because they don't own the infrastructure that facilitates that. Do you think that we should be able to justify that because this is a social hazard that the government should be able to provide more regulation in this area?
I think that the government should be working towards providing more regulation in that area, but I don't know how like conceivable that is, since it is like the internet is quite massive and the government is doesn't have all of the resources and skills to be able to regulate that entirely. I think the work that they're doing to update people on potential threats and ways that they can protect themselves is something that is beneficial for protecting private individuals when encountering those public space, like internet spaces, that they do become susceptible to attack.
Along those lines, but we go back 40 years ago, seatbelts were not mandatory. Most people did not wear seatbelts, and it only became prominent. People starting to wear seatbelts every single time when governmental organization says we're going to start ticketing people for not wearing seatbelts. Do you think that there could be a similar mechanism to encourage people to start using things like multi-factor authentication and other security measures, so that even though they're the ones who are in danger, that we say, but kind of protect them from themselves?
I don't, oh, you can go ahead.
It's just gonna be kind of difficult to do so because the seatbelts are already installed, so therefore like you're not having to pay extra to buckle your seatbelt. It's just there. I think it's kind of more difficult when you have to like pay for these protective services. I think if the government provided a sort of protective service that they could invest in and then decided to like maybe start finding people, then I think that they could probably move along those lines. But until then, I think that it's kind of hard for them to mandate it, especially since it's like kind of a new work.
They also could lean more into mandating like private companies that have those controls and the resources to do that, while a more individual level, you can't really mandate and enforce that as well.
Thank you for including controls in the answer. Any other questions? All right, guys, we're back on Wednesday.
We put the US flag in our